share today is understanding who are the I don't know the decision makers is quite the word. What are the roles of the township officials in each township? And it really gets complicated because every township is totally different in doing that. You know, you go to Lower Merion, which is this monstrosity of an employment base, and you'll never talk to the township manager. You'll talk to someone like Chris Leswing, who's within their planning department, and they have official employees. And you go to my township, and I don't know who makes any decisions. You know, when you live out in the boonies like I do, you know, there's officially a lady who's the township secretary manager, but she really has no decision-making process and probably doesn't provide a lot of guidance. So it's a challenge to figure out who to go to when we're trying to do this. And Brian, we kind of have this on Warrington. It's really hard to figure out. As stuff pops up and you're seeing on your project, stuff is always popping up. Who do we go to get answers? And the sooner that we can piece that together, the better we can help guide the project through the decision-making matrix. It's like the steep slopes on Brandywine. Is it really the town? Sometimes they just turn to the township engineer and they turn it and rely on them to do it, and they rely a lot on Craig to do his stuff. I don't want to get into the nightmare that's the city of Philadelphia. But each of you are running into it in East Brandywine from Mapleview. The manager's basically nowhere to be found. I mean, they're relying on the two consultants, the solicitor and the engineer, to do stuff. And the problem is at times when you can't get them to cooperate, then it just drags out. How do you get them to move off that? So I bring up the first thing is just checking historically what we know internally. You know, soon we'll have the situation, we'll have a combined arrangement, and that's going to be a big help, candidly. It's one of the things that's a big interest to me is you get places where we won't have been as much, and they have expertise. Denny's office has expertise in those areas, and we can rely on that. So we start internally with what we know, what we've learned. I think there's some instinctual stuff with, we have nothing, we're going in a new area. Just start with how big is the township. Typically speaking, the bigger the township, the more the role until you get into the Lower Merion. But for a lot of other ones, the manager has a key role on it. We have the situation with 123 Creek Road, where clearly the engineer has a big role in that. And it's really just kind of piecing together. You may eventually even look for the website to see if they have meeting minutes. And within the meeting minutes, there may be hints of who's playing a more active role and what's going on. Does the engineer's name come up a lot? For the sake of argument, you get the sense that the manager's kind of having to do with it. Usually our projects that have an attorney involved, the attorney will provide, as Brian's doing, and so forth. Play a key role in that. Challenge would be if we don't have a relationship in Warrington, we were just learning how to deal with Rob and this stuff going on there. It does take a while. The difficulty is this is a really key item to know, because almost everything has complexity these days. Even you're doing the pools, and the question comes up is who do I check with to get an answer? You go into different. You're not talking to the township manager at all. So those bigger townships usually have a staff person, and figuring out who's that person. And the next step is developing a relationship so you can have them take our calls. One of the hardest things is getting anybody an answer. So looking for any opportunity to say thank you when we're at an actual meeting, trying to go over and talk to them in one way or another is really, really important. So all this is really nebulous, I get it, and yet as project managers over time, all of you been in a situation where they're gonna ask you, we'll find out that answer. And They just arbitrarily decide that we're the ones. Now, part of that's because a good engineering firm takes responsibility for overseeing all that stuff and tries to help guide and lead a project through the approval process, usually with the attorney, client's attorney. So hit the pause button. You're all looking at me. What the hell's he talking about? But thoughts, questions, comments on your own experiences?
Yeah, I think Warrington, just because it's fresh, it's been an interesting process when the PC holds so much weight and then they hand it over and feels like they have no weight.
Yeah.
It's an interesting, delicate balance of, okay, please this person, but no end game where things need to be. I think we're still trying to figure that out in Warrington. So there's definitely a read the room situation, but there's a lot more going on behind the scenes that you just have to kind of piece together as you go.
Right, if you think about so I'll throw out the township managers. Generally speaking, their first thought process is job survival. They are always worried about the next election cycle because their boss is an elected official. And as we see, there are always different viewpoints and things are going on, right? Even in that project. So you get one faction that might be helping the neighbors and supporting the neighbors, and the other wants to see improvement along the corridor, and before you know it, somebody else gets elected, and have they dipped their toe too far into the water of support for one or another? It's a hard job being a manager. And so the first thing is survival. Second of all is pleasing the bosses, who are the elected officials. Third is the holding off and trying to address the needs of his or her true constituents, which is the residents. And at the same time, some of them understand a bigger vision, what would be really good. You go to Phoenixville Borough, and the borough manager there, he came in and he's a military background and strong leadership. And he said, here's what needs to be done, and kind of helped force his way into it. And if any of you have been up to Phoenixville lately, it's a pretty amazing transformation that's gone through there. I go into Bridgeport Borough, and it's hard to tell there. You get the impression that the manager is not as dominant in his role and relies a lot more on Gannon Fleming, who's been there forever, Ed Wooden and guys with Tim, and Sal Bella, who's the solicitor. And so that changes that completely. But it's a hard job. It's definitely specifically the manager's job. Or you even think about Chris Lesling over in Lower Merion. Chris is a good planner. He understands what's good stuff, but that doesn't mean good planning gets to be the priority. So I bring these up as becoming a really good project manager isn't all the stuff you take on the test to get your PE. In fact, and often it's a lot less of that and much more of these things. So, again, thoughts, comments?
I think one of the things I was surprised about is how much you don't realize politics weigh in, especially on, a township or a borough that's super small, and you don't realize how difficult some things are. That and the lack of consistency or trying to get a hold of anyone, it just really makes you question local government sometimes. And then they want these certain things showing on your plans, or they want certain improvements being shown, and then you can't get a hold of anyone to try to get, like even with East Whiteland Township, we're trying to figure out, the configuration of Lap Road. I don't know if we still have comments or anything back from, or we didn't get them until right before the master plan. So it's stuff like that where we're trying to get ahead of it, and they just, I know they have a lot of stuff going on, but we just don't get feedback. So I think that's the frustrating part too. And trying to figure out, how to relay that to your client. Do you want to proceed this way? Are you willing to take that risk, or do you want to wait, kind of thing? So that's always another frustrating thing.
And so tying into that, as you're just alluding to, we're trying to give our client guidance and direction, and they would love to have more information. They would love it to be more stable. They would love to know that, hey, Christina's going to call within 2 hours. She's going to have all the answers and going to be set up. And instead, it could be a week, it could be 2 weeks. That's really hard. It's very frustrating. No doubt about it. John, what do you think?
I'm just thinking about Booth Win and how it just seems to have been kind of the opposite of everything we're saying, where the township manager there almost really didn't have much power at all in saying all of this, and it was really the township engineer that was driving more probably the supervisors and the planning commission, because remember the planning commission wanted them to bypass do preliminary and final together, and then it got to supervisors and they were like, no, you're doing preliminary and then final together, because they wanted to make more comment.
They wanted to build more.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, every situation, that's the difficult. So go back to your comment about local government. Surrounding states have county government. In Delaware, it's 3 counties. And so it's the same core group. And certainly from my perspective, it would seem more logical that that's a more efficient way to do this stuff. And usually you're more likely to have professional staff who are consistent throughout the county and the area, not jumping from one to the other. Like all the time we're spending just figuring out signature blocks. Like, really, seriously.
2 months for a dumpster.
Right. Remember the insanity with that?
I think that's a good point though too. Like, also remember, like Dwell, the architects don't necessarily deal with townships because they're Virginia, and when they're asking for these regulations and where they should be looking, seems like a no-brainer to us. But then taking a step back, like, oh, they don't have all these townships they have to deal with on a regular basis. So
it's it's definitely a foreign concept to a lot of them.
That, and I think too, they're not familiar, I think, with the climate.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, oh, well, we could just, get a waiver, we don't want to make this requirement. And I mean, they're like questioning Lou too. And I'm like, I think Lou knows his stuff kind of thing. Like, yeah, it's just like that. They definitely are pushing, and especially, I don't think it's going to be an easy sell for some of the things that they're hoping to get relief from.
So that's a great point, Christine, is the two of you are working on a team that's from outside the area. And when we get these more sophisticated stuff, the thing in Bridgeport, the project in Bridgeport, 4th Street's the same way. I haven't quite figured together where the company's primary base. They said Ohio. I thought it was down in Atlanta, but whatever. What knowledge do they really know of Bridgeport and the quirkiness? Now, it turns out Bridgeport may be a cooperative one, but for every cooperative one, there are 10 or 20 that are non-cooperative. That every little waiver comes with a significant price. And they may just say, they just ask for a waiver for it, right? When we're in somewhere else, it's hard. I bring this up, but I'd love to say that being a PM, they're neat, simple things. We learn these little skill sets, and away we go, and we check the box, and we got it done. And it's, unfortunately, we're in a career where in Pennsylvania, there's 67 counties, and think of how many municipalities within each county. And we need to be mini experts in everyone that we go into. That's not easy. That is not an easy process. New Jersey's basically the same way. It has the county and the local municipalities. I share with a lot of it just to recognize that this will frustrate you. Like, there's no way around it. This is very tiring. It's like I have way more important things to do than call Ed Latchall to find out why he's asking for concrete monuments when the rest of them that says everything can be iron pins. But the only way to get to it is just to call. Now the good news is I have, Ed and I are dinosaurs. We've been around a long time. So he'll take the call. It's just frustrating that it takes that kind of effort to do it. But it will. It's do it. So wherever you can to build relationships. When Rob Loper was in Upper Merion, when we were doing a lot of work in Upper Merion, it was so helpful to have Rob, because Rob could give us behind the scenes, you say, hey, that, that supervisor's pretty stressed over that, or, we haven't been able to get that waiver through. What seems pretty, Zach Partner's pretty good at that in East Whiteland as well. I'd encourage you to commit yourself to wherever you can, building the relationships with the individuals. I got off to a bumpy start in Trap Barrow with the manager there, for a variety of reasons, but eventually I did where I feel I can call him and explain it. And I had to put aside my frustrations over some particular things that were going on and say, in the end, I'm sure I'm gonna need him for something. So that's just a process. Every time we go in there, we're trying to build that relationship with the elected officials. Not elected officials, the staff at the township level to know. And we talked about it. The secretary's always the saving grace. You can call and say, you didn't include this in the package, or what we need to know something by a certain date. Not quite what you went to school for landscape architecture or civil engineering, but really important long term for your ability to manage projects. And the difficulty is you'll have 5-10 projects going on, and every one of them in a different municipality. Because it used to be that there'd be a lot of going on and you become sort of semi-expert in that particular township. Nowadays, there are less projects, they're just more problematic. And so we're diverse in where we're doing it. Any thoughts, Connor?
All makes sense.
I mean, you have your own little world, and I shouldn't say your own, but you've had to deal with, in Philadelphia, has its own set of oddities that are really unique.
Yeah. I've gotten to know the one PWD reviewer, which helps, especially on the cricket club. I went back and forth with them a lot. So.
Yeah, man, kind of a classic example of a situation. Huh?
Yeah, and especially in a place where it's hard to get a hold of someone real without like going through emails, set up a date like a week in advance to get like a 5-minute phone call. So.
I mean, that's such a huge help to our client, which is also as a side benefit to us, but that's huge. And that's a lot of what they are asking for of us. Sometimes, and in many cases, the attorney's really good at that as well. As you know, any of you work with Denise and Lou, they take that really seriously and they work hard to develop those relationships, but we don't always have projects that have attorneys or have attorneys that are active. So I just encourage you to be constantly thinking about it, is how you build your network of contacts so that over time those resources are there, just as Connor said. The company has developed a lot of them, and our job, Paul, Jim, myself, should be to make sure to expose you to them and give opportunities for each of you to make those phone calls and just build off of them type of day. And that's something we're going to have to work on to make sure that happens. So that as time goes on, you have that network as well. Okay? Other thoughts? This is one where you've all had that experience already. Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for